Two causes of loss that are acting on the same loss for a property.
Things that insurance companies will pay out for if there's an issue with the roof and things they won't, right?
How do you identify that there's two of these, and is it still a covered loss?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Mission Control Podcast. We are here at SRC Summit 2023, and we're here with none other than Mathew Mulholland. What's up, bruh?
How's it going?
I love your fucking swag, you know that?
All my swag?
The hat, the glasses, the beard. I mean, it's just, it does something for me. I appreciate it.
Is that why you have your leg up in front of the camera, to hide some things?
No, I have the leg up so we can flaunt our roofer swag on our feet.
We do
right?
have the same socks on.
Yeah, we got a lot in common. Weird. It's not just the socks.
Right.
We were talking about what are we going to talk about. It's ironic, right? There's a paradox here. We're talking about what we're going to talk about, so we don't know what we're talking about, but we're going to figure it out.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
See, oddly enough. So, as I digress, we're going to get back to, we're going to talk about concurrent causation. Now, you know me, I own a marketing agency, and I'm not qualified to speak on that subject matter, but I'll tell you who is. And it's not the videographer. It's my man Matt here.
Luckily.
Talk that shit.
Otherwise, it'd be weird if we were talking about it. No sense at all. So, yeah, you asked me what would be worth talking about, and I think concurrent causation is one of the more important topics in our industry today, mostly because it's utilized against us. And for your audience's sake, concurrent causation is when you have two causes of loss happening concurrently in sequence two. Doesn't matter in what order or even if it's at the same time or not, but two causes of loss that are acting on the same loss for a property. So you could have wear and tear, the age of the roof, which is allowing it to have low speed winds cause damage because the wear and tear makes the roof more susceptible to wind damage. Where normally it would be very, very strong winds for a new roof to cause damage. This low speed one was able to cause damage because of wear and tear. So you have two causes of loss: wind, a covered cause of loss, and wear and tear, a non-covered cause of loss.
Okay.
And then the question becomes, how do you identify that there's two of these, and is it still a covered loss? And that is a little bit state specific, but what they're doing to us is just saying that there's wear and tear and that there's no damage caused by wind, which is a lie. It's omittance of information.
We teach our kids that, right?
Right.
Omission is kind of very similar to lying.
It is?
Yeah,
Well,
okay, go on.
Can be. And depending on the type of expert, there might be some ethical requirements that might be statutory that could make it illegal for them to omit. So, especially if they're an engineer. You hear that, engineers?
Getting
Can't
spicy.
do that. No, you can't do that.
Next, we're going to name drop, so make sure you stick around to the end.
Hague.
So, all right, so in my simple mind, let me just make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. You know, you have things that insurance companies will pay out for if there's an issue with the roof and things they won't, right?
Right.
And my guess would be what's happening, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a carrier is saying, okay, wear and tear is what made it so that 50-mile-an-hour roof or gust of wind blew the shingle off, which is not covered, these shingles, right? As opposed to what you're saying, which would be it's not necessarily the fact that the roof is 7 years old and there's some wear and tear. It was actually still the wind that caused the damage, and you should have to pay out a percentage or this claim in general.
I mean, the reality is we don't know what wear and tear even means because they failed to define it. But let's say it is part of the loss, and they're not wrong about that. Let's say it is.
Sure.
You still have wind acting on it and still have something that's covered. In certain states, you'd have to figure out what the primary cause of loss is. Can you separate out all the wear and tear damage and all the wind damage? And if you can't, and in most states, even in the state of Texas with concurrent causation doctrine, without being able to separate those, you would still pay for the covered cause of loss of wind, which means you end up paying for all the wear and tear anyway. It doesn't matter. If you can separate and say this is all wear and tear and this is wind, then you only have to pay for the wind portion of it. For my example, you wouldn't be able to separate that. The whole reason that the wind occurred is because of the wear and tear. Now, they're only naming the cause of loss that starts the chain of events off, which to them is wear and tear, but they fail to name any concurrent causation happening with it. Let's say it's old roof, his shingles getting old, it's a 3-tab. Does over the age of a 3-tab, does a crease just appear automatically out of nowhere? Does not. So something had to lift that. outside force has to lift that shingle to cause it to break. Just because it's old doesn't mean that wind didn't occur, and wind is still a covered cause of loss. The vast majority of cases, if you have wear and tear and wind, wear and tear and hail, the hail or the wind is still covered. Period. And all of this bullshit that we're dealing with is because they're only naming what they perceive as the proximate or primary cause of wear and tear.
So has this always been an issue? Is it becoming more pervasive of an issue now?
It was always an issue, but it is becoming much more pervasive. I'm going to look that word up after this. But I think I know what you mean out of context. Yeah, probably. Anyway, so yeah.
And we'll circle back, and if I misused it, we're going to do a roast of Mike Stearns. It's going to be fucking great.
That would be fun. Or you can roast me for not having a vocabulary.
Someone's getting fucking roasted.
Either way,
Yeah.
there's a nice roast
like
involved. And I love roast.
I'm hungry. Yeah.
Duck. So if you can't get them to name all the causes of loss, then you're in a pickle because they're just going to continue to say that it's denied. And a lot of times the engineering firms will just say it isn't wind or it isn't hail, it's wear and tear. What they're not actually saying is that, yes, there is wind and hail damage, but it wouldn't have occurred if not but for the wear and tear. And because they're not outlining it like that, then the carrier is reading it wasn't wind, it wasn't hail, it was wear and tear, and they're denying the roof. It's bullshit. Absolute bullshit.
Aren't standards very interesting? So I sat in on, there was just a panel a little while ago with you, Badger, a few others. The amount of times that I heard reasonable and reasonably, right? My clients, if they deliver X in a reasonable amount of time and they can reasonably expect, it would be reasonable to assume, you can't discern what any of that means because it's very arbitrary. What's reasonable to you, to me, to them?
It is subjective, but that is how the laws are written. They literally say reasonable.
Right.
Even the policy uses the term reasonable.
Right.
The question then becomes who gets to decide what's reasonable? A jury gets to decide what's reasonable, but you can't get a jury to decide that unless you go all the way to court. So it's a problem for someone that doesn't want litigation.
Well,
what's interesting though, we had this whole discussion, that very same panel, where we were trying to get him to define what he meant by enforcement for some of the ordinance and law type provisions, and he wouldn't define it. But the reality is, would a reasonable person assume that something that is in the books as a law required by contractors, would it reasonably be assumed that it's enforced?
It's so interesting to me.
Use that against you, Steve?
Well, it's so interesting to me because if you think about it, yes, it's defined by whatever the court of law says or a jury, right? Whether it's a judge or jury. If you think about it, you've got an insurance company, and again, I'm very naive to all of this, so I'm just gonna go with I'd probably be like the homeowner, right?
Oh yeah.
A reasonable person.
Right.
Don't ask my wife if I'm reasonable or not, but anywho. So if you think about it, they've got how many hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbying and influence by virtue of that, and everything operates off a case law, I'm assuming, right? You go back to precedents if there's not an established case that dictates, okay, and even if there is, right, I'm sure the insurance carriers had some sort of influence in that with the extent of pull that they have by way of lobbying. Wouldn't you think?
Well, the lobbying isn't going to really, well, it's not supposed to push case law type verdicts.
Sure.
But the issue is the insurance carriers get to see every case that's brought against them. They get to pick and choose which case is perfect to send through a court of appeals, possibly to a Supreme Court of a state, in order to get legitimate case law. So they'll pick the one that has a really shitty plaintiff attorney. And we're always looking for the right case on our side. I'm not an attorney. The plaintiff attorneys are always looking for the right case, but the reality is if they're a good attorney, even if they get the right case, the carriers are likely to just push to settle outside of court, and they can make it very worthwhile for a policyholder to agree to whatever their numbers are. So it's highly unlikely our side ever really gets case law in our favor. The fact that we do get case law in our favor from time to time is quite surprising if you really think about how that works out. So I don't think that there's a lot of lobbyist action in that, because we shouldn't have any case law in our favor if there was some. So I think that the legal system is somewhat removed from it. There's definitely going to be some bad apples and some money passed. But there's some evidence there that it's not really happening.
Okay, but it's still kind of a stacked deck, is what it sounds like.
It's a stacked deck either way because they get to choose way better than we can.
It's like, if you, hypothetically, if you had, a marketing agency that wasn't great, but they could choose, out of the 40 terrible experience, they've got the 41st one that was good, we'll show you this one.
Right.
We'll sell you off of that expectation.
Exactly.
Hypothetically, these
Hypothetical
right.
things.
So let's go back to the concurrent loss. What is like a proposed remedy? Is this something where you don't know what the solution is, but you know that it's a problem, or
No.
do you have a proposed solution?
It's simple. It's a simple solution. Ask the adjuster to ask their expert, their engineer that they probably sent out, to identify all the causes of loss that are acting concurrently on this. If they can force the adjuster to identify all the causes of loss, you're great. And if they say no, then you can simply say, can you just ask the engineer for clarification? I want to know if they're saying that it wasn't hail damage because it's the wear and tear that allowed hail damage, or there's no hail damage at all on this. And you might even have to open up to make sure that they're talking about both functional and cosmetic damages, because some engineers are, the whole engineer debacle is a whole nother thing. We could have an hour together or 5.
And we will at some point.
Not at this event.
Not
But
this event.
and the next time that we sit down together, there's a big discussion there that I'm very, very passionate about. That's where we lose on our side more than any other time. And the deck is definitely stacked against us, but there are ways to win that battle.
It's amazing information, man. I'm sure a lot of people are going to benefit from that. If they wanted to learn more about this and other situations that are happening,
Google.
you go. What you do is you go on Facebook and you ask for legal advice in a
Yeah.
Facebook group. No, honestly though, if somebody
Yeah.
wanted to connect with you, like what
Sure.
would be the best way that they could connect with you and become more well informed to?
Take a look at the website, listentothisbull.com. You can find us on YouTube. There's a lot of free content on there, 10, 15-minute videos talk about concepts in the insurance world. Free, they're entertaining, they're not boring. There's a really sexy, super intelligent dude on there. I don't remember his name.
It ain't me.
No,
Yeah.
no. I mean, yeah, it is. Listen to this bull on YouTube. It's fun.
Awesome.
It's fun.
Dude, thank you so much for coming, brother. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me,
Yeah.
sock brother.
Ask.
Esque.
Roofer. And we gone.